Morant with a running start. Elevate! Dunks! Oh my goodness! Tie game in overtime. Gasol will turn his heat. It's gone! Memphis on top. 7-10 remaining. Conley now with three. Count it! A 15-point lead for Memphis. And Blake Griffin gets into it on the floor with Randolph. Hard to tell if there are any punches being thrown under there, but Griffin took acceptance. Adams going long. Morant! He hit it! Jamorant! Insanity!
You gotta be kidding me.
Welcome to Grits and Grinds, a Memphis Grizzlies podcast. My name is Keith Parrish, and it is draft week. I am very excited. On today's episode, I'm going to tell you who I've decided I want the Grizzlies to draft the most. I'm also going to go over the latest NBA reports and rumors that relate to the Grizzlies. Let's get right to it. Jake Fisher of Yahoo at the end of the week, last week, reported a few things about the Grizzlies. One of them, he said the Grizzlies are not interested in moving Marcus Smart. That report came out basically right as I was wrapping up my last episode with DeMichael Cole. On that episode, DeMichael said the Grizzlies, of course, are always going to be listening in trades and will be aggressive when necessary, but maybe aren't necessarily shopping Marcus Smart. So all that lines up. Does that mean I will slow down with my fake trade ideas involving Marcus Smart? Of course not. I think one of the Grizzlies' paths to getting way better is possibly including Marcus Smart in a deal. That doesn't mean they're going to, of course. And it also doesn't mean this report isn't just maybe the Grizzlies being like, oh, Rockets, you're actually interested in Marcus Smart? Well, let's up the offer. Let's get some real considerations if we're going to make some kind of big blockbuster deal. Not that the Grizzlies would make a blockbuster deal, of course, but I thought that report was interesting. But also what Jake Fisher is talking about that I think really interests us Grizzlies fans is him continuing to bring up all of the bigs and centers that are being, essentially shopped. Maybe shopped is too strong of a word. These guys are just available. But beyond like the Clint Capella and the Hawks situation, Jake Fisher's saying like Brook Lopez is available. Brook Lopez for Marcus Smart, straight up, possibly makes a lot of sense for both teams. Maybe both guys are on the downward slope of their career. Maybe Brook Lopez more rapidly so, but it fills a need. Maybe for both teams. Isaiah Stewart is available. Once again, it's being mentioned out there that the Pistons are looking to shake up their front court. Isaiah Stewart would be a useful player for the Grizzlies. That's someone you wouldn't have to trade Marcus Smart for. You could probably just do that with Luke Kennard and maybe some second-round picks or something. Mitchell Robinson. Lots of outlets are talking about how the Knicks are prioritizing, of course, keeping Isaiah Hartenstein. That will be an expensive proposition, and thus Mitchell Robinson could be available, and I'm seeing a lot of outlets maybe just echoing each other, but they're saying the Grizzlies continue to monitor the situations with Clint Capella and Mitchell Robinson as they look to bolster their front court. Of course, Mitchell Robinson has some pretty extreme injury concerns. He's only appeared in 90 games over the past 2 seasons, but his contract isn't that big. He's a great defensive rebounder. He's a great shot blocker. And possibly, if you're going to break through into the second round or into the conference finals, you need some luck, and maybe rolling the dice on someone with injury concerns like Mitchell Robinson could be a path forward for the Grizzlies if the acquisition cost is not too high. Like, I understand maybe Robert Williams, too injury prone, to consider on a flyer. Maybe Mitchell Robinson would be somebody that you would consider. But there are just so many names out there on the big man market that are available via trade. Also, this continues to be interesting to me. Jake Fisher emphasized that basically the entire Hawks team is available outside of Jalen Johnson. Now, the Grizzlies have no interest in the guards, Trae Young or DeJounte Murray, but beyond Clint Capella, I remain interested in Onyeka Okongwu. Also, DeAndre Hunter. I think my priority for the Grizzlies this offseason, it's not necessarily getting a big. Like, they're going to get a big. My number one priority this offseason for the Grizzlies is to get a wing with size, to get someone who can play the 3 and the 4, someone 6'8" or higher, possibly, who can score. And like, maybe that will tip my hand for what I'm thinking or what I want the Grizzlies to do in the draft. But I think getting a player like DeAndre Hunter would be super useful. Another guy who maybe fits that mold, not a scorer, is Dorian Finney-Smith. A report on Hoops Hype came out. This was, first of all, it echoed Matt Moore's report from last week that the Grizzlies are interested in Daron Sharp. That, of course, is a big, not a wing. It's saying the Grizzlies reached out at last year's trade deadline to try to get Daron Sharp. This is the first time I've ever seen this report. Hoops Hype had this today. They also said the Grizzlies continue to be interested or have previously shown interest in Dorian Finney-Smith. We've all thought that's someone who the Grizzlies attempted to acquire when they were rebuffed on getting Mikal Bridges. Maybe they also offered stuff for Cam Johnson, and then maybe they offered stuff for Dorian Finney-Smith. Dorian Finney-Smith, wing with size, can play the 3 and the 4. Not a particularly good shooter, but I think Dorian Finney-Smith, acquiring him would be a nice pickup for the Grizzlies. I think, interestingly, in this situation, that's a player, Dorian Finney-Smith is a player you could trade Luke Kennard for straight up. Maybe you need to attach some second-round picks or something. I don't think that would merit a first-round pick, but a reason the Nets would do this is it would get them out of Dorian Finney-Smith's player option that he has for the 2025-2026 season. With the expiration of Ben Simmons' contract and then getting rid of Dorian Finney-Smith's contract, it would open up even more cap space potentially for the Nets in a couple of seasons. So that could be something the Nets would be interested in. Also, that leads into some other reports that Jake Fisher has said, and I've seen it other places, that there has been trade interest league-wide in Luke Kennard. Now, I perhaps was wrong thinking that other teams would not want to pick up his last year of his deal and just take on an expiring $15 million salary. My thinking was it's a slight overpay for Luke Kennard, but mainly cap space isn't that important anymore in the NBA. Free agency has been diminished, what with all these players usually signing extensions. There aren't normally that many good players available in free agency. We're seeing it right now. The Magic thought they were going to maybe spend big to get like Malik Monk. No, he stayed on the Kings. Even the Sixers, who opened up all this cap space this year, maybe they're going to get Paul George, maybe not. And then what do you do? So I thought because like expiring contracts aren't as important as they used to be, like say 10 or 15 years ago, maybe teams would not line up to get Luke Kennard. But there have been reports, including from Jake Fisher, that there's been significant interest in Luke Kennard league-wide as the Grizzlies continue pondering what to do with his contract situation. The trading of Luke Kennard for Dorian Finney-Smith, it helps out the Nets if they want to clear some cap space, and it gets the Grizzlies, I think, a very useful player. The home run version of that trade with Dorian Finney-Smith is if you could get Dorian Finney-Smith and Daron Sharp for, say, Luke Kennard and Zaire Williams. I mean, how many second-round picks is that worth to you? That'd be an awesome haul to add a young big you can try out, to add a useful wing defender, a guy with some size who fits alongside Jaren and Desmond and Ja and Marcus. And then you also get to keep your 9th pick. That seems like a great outcome for this Grizzlies summer. Another situation where you could trade Luke Kennard, where a team might be interested in his expiring contract, is the Orlando Magic. If the Magic, they've been reported to only want to pay large balloon short-term contracts. Like maybe they don't want to give Klay Thompson a 3 or 4 year deal. If they strike out on other free agent options, this would allow them to roll over their cap space to next year and add shooting. 1 year of Luke Kennard. I mean, maybe they would just take Luke Kennard into your salary cap space. You pick up a trade exception. Maybe they would send you back Wendell Carter Jr. or something like that. So all of that, I think, continues to be very interesting. The league-wide reports about centers being available. I mean, Walker Kessler is available. That's not somebody I've floated a lot of fake trades about. The Grizzlies, of course, took Walker Kessler with their pick a couple of seasons ago. It was part of the Jake LaRavia trade. They didn't actually, use that pick. But the Jazz apparently are willing to listen to offers on Walker Kessler. Would you trade the 9th pick for Walker Kessler? It's an interesting proposition. It is maybe a lower ceiling move, but if you can get Walker Kessler, Salary matching, not really an issue because he's on a cheap rookie scale deal. That remains something I think that becomes, another option for the Grizzlies. All of these names of players available, again, Brook Lopez, Mitchell Robinson, Walker Kessler, Isaiah Stewart, Clint Capella, all these guys very, very available. It gives the Grizzlies plenty of options for what to do. Now, as far as like what the Grizzlies should do this offseason, like I said, I want them to get a wing with size. I think that's more important long-term to get someone who can play the 3 and the 4, so you can let Jaren play the 5 and you're not dependent on like Brandon Clark always being healthy, always being available. I think you need some more scoring, of course, for this team. That's one of my priorities. I was listening to the Dunked On mock offseason. If you don't know, it's Nate Duncan. He and his cohorts, like they passionately care about covering the NBA accurately, and they do their thing where they try to simulate what could happen in the offseason with player movement. Their objective for the Grizzlies was to get a front court big, which makes sense. But then their other target was to dodge the tax completely, which I just found that to be totally not on the mark for the Grizzlies. That is not, I think, an objective for the Grizzlies. With that objective, they declined on their mock off season. They declined Luke Kennard's contract. They signed Andre Drummond to a 1-year deal for $7 million. And then that was it. And I think like that did show perhaps when they went through this entire exercise that you could get a useful center. Like they signed Andre Drummond for $7 million. Also, like Jalen Smith, my target, signed for, I believe, like $6 or $7 million. Gogo Batadze was available for the same amount of money. That let me know that maybe some of these front court free agent dreams are attainable, modest dreams as they are. They also, when they went through their exercise, they kind of showed that a lot of the shooting guards are not going to get paid. And that's something I've gone over before. Like in their mock off season, they declined Luke Kennard's contract. Someone else signed him for 3 years, $30 million. And then when they were done, they decided that was probably an overpay because there were plenty of shooting guards available who just missed out completely on getting new contracts. It was like Gary Harris and I think Malik Beasley and Eric Gordon. And just there was a lot of players when they were done, that those guys are available for the minimum. So I thought that was useful as far as an exercise to wonder about like what the Grizzlies should do with Luke Kennard's player option and to think about what could happen in free agency. But as far as like, again, an objective, I thought they were wrong. The objective is not to get a front court player and to dodge the tax. The objective, boys and girls, is to build a contender. And the objective, specifically, in my mind, is to build the best team possible for the next 2 seasons. The Grizzlies' offseason objective is to do what it takes to maximize your opportunities to win playoff series in the next 2 seasons before Jaren Jackson Jr. hits free agency. Perhaps maybe the subtitle to that or the further context to that is you want to maximize your chances to win in the next 2 seasons while also not mortgaging your future, while also maintaining long-term sustainable success. I think you can make a strong argument to say, no, you actually should maybe short circuit your paths to long-term success to maximize the next 2 years. I think the next 2 seasons, when you have jamorant, Desmond Bane, and Jaren Jackson Jr. all under contract, all in their absolute primes, this might be your best chance to win. And because of that, most decisions you make, I think, should be made with the idea of how does this maximize our chances to win this year or next year? Also, of course, Marcus Smart, not getting any younger. He's also signed for the next 2 seasons. Now, with that objective of maximizing your next 2 seasons, you don't have to make any big moves this summer. You can wait and see what happens. You can wait to see how your team looks during the regular season with the healthy Ja and Desmond and Marcus and Jaren all playing together. But I do think your goal should be, we need to win before 2026. Or at least we need to realize this might be our best chance, and thus I think decisions should be influenced by that. Now, will that influence what they do in the draft? Yeah, I think so. I really think it should. Now, I'm not saying that means take the most quote-unquote NBA-ready player. I don't think that normally works out for a team, but I think you have to at least somewhat consider fit. I know a lot of times with the NBA draft, people say, ignore fit. Draft the best player available. I hear you, but for the Grizzlies specifically, I think you have to look at, I've got Ja, Desmond, and Jaren. I want players that kind of complement them, and that's who I prioritize. And so let's talk about who I want the Grizzlies to draft, about what they should prioritize. And we'll do that right after this short break. Underdog Fantasy is a unique gaming experience. It's a way to play fantasy sports for cash. I've been playing Underdog Fantasy for over a year. You can pick hires or lowers. You can play daily fantasy against your friends. You can do best ball tournaments. They have every single sport. I love it for the NBA. Also, I really enjoy it for the NFL, which is coming up in not too long. If you want to try out Underdog Fantasy, use my promo code FBBF. That's FBBF as in Fast Break Breakfast. If you use my promo code, they will match your opening deposit up to $250 plus give you a free pick. So if you want to play fantasy sports for cash, it's a great time to try it out. Again, use that promo code FBBF or click the link in this episode's description and Underdog will match your opening deposit up to $250. All right, so I'm going to tell you who I want the Grizzlies to draft. And honestly, I'm probably going to put it in the YouTube thumbnail, so you already know who I want. I want the Grizzlies to draft Ron Holland. Now, before I explain why I want the Grizzlies to take Ron Holland, I have to continually emphasize I'm not a draft expert. This is, of course, a subjective opinion, and it's largely an uninformed opinion. The people who professionally do this know way more than me. I'm not a draft expert. The studying I do is I read a lot of other draft experts. I digest their opinions. I don't even, like, when people say they watch tape, I don't watch tape. I don't have access to Synergy. I'm not going back and watching college games or overseas games. I'm watching YouTube clips where other analysts, many of them amateur analysts, give their own opinions. So I think you know all that, but I just feel like I have to re-emphasize. Like when the Grizzlies draft someone on Wednesday night, I'm not going to second guess them. I'm going to trust that the professionals in the Grizzlies front office, they know infinitely more than I do. If they trade the pick for an existing player, or if they trade one of their own players for a pick, I will give what I think is an informed opinion about that based on the perceived value of like a certain pick. I know kind of what the 15th pick is worth. So I feel like I can give an informed opinion on that. But on the draft prospects, I cannot give, honestly, an informed opinion. However, when I look at the Grizzlies team, when I look at some of the prospects and what they theoretically could be, that's how I formed my opinion. So this is not an expert. This is just a Grizzlies podcaster who I figured you guys want to hear who I want the Grizzlies to draft, and it is Ron Holland. And here's why. I was initially drawn to him based on the athleticism, the speed, the defense, and the reports of the motor. I think the thing that I get most swayed by is people talking about his motor. I saw someone compare his motor to Dennis Rodman. That has probably unduly swayed me. I am all about motor, especially in these athletic wings. Now, initially, I made the comparison to Josh Jackson because when I was watching video, that's what I saw. But I keep seeing all these NBA draft experts, these NBA Twitter draft guys who I actually hold their opinion in some esteem. I saw John Hollinger put him number one on his big board. That is all probably just confirmation bias. I admit that. But when I consider the fit on this team, yes, I am considering fit and the player type. I think maximizing the Grizzlies' chances going forward, getting a guy like Ron Holland, seems like an awesome path to take. When I look at the NBA and I think about some of the most important things for roster building, it's getting size and shooting and athleticism, shot creation, defense. Ron Holland, of course, does not have shooting, but he does have size. He has athleticism. He has shot creation. He was able to score in the G League, no problem. Of course, his team was horrible. The Ignite basically lost all their games. But I still think with how young he is and the burden placed upon him, he can create his own shot. The huge issues, like, again, no shooting. Most important things in the NBA, probably size, shot creation, shooting, athleticism. Right now, he does not have shooting. Somebody tracked that 1 in 4 of his three-point attempts in the G League this year missed the rim. Also, there are concerns about his shot selection. All of that, to me, I care not that much about because I just want the motor. I want wings with size. And also, when I look at the Grizzlies, and this is where I consider fit again, the Grizzlies' best players, Jamorant, Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr. Those are all very good offensive players. They're extremely skilled. They're all all-star level players, in my opinion. Desmond Bane, of course, has not been an all-star yet, but he absolutely could be. All of them, in my mind, don't really have a high motor. That's not their thing. Grabbing loose balls, getting rebounds, not really their thing. I think the Grizzlies, to maximize their roster, to maximize their best players, need those connective pieces. We hope Marcus Smart is one of those connective pieces. Vince Williams Jr., I absolutely believe, is one of those connective pieces. You cannot understate his importance to me. Like, the emergence of Vince Williams Jr. last year is a massive thing for the Grizzlies, I believe, because he fits so well alongside Ja, Desmond, and Jaren. I think adding another high motor athletic wing makes all the sense in the world. And I think it's something they need to prioritize this offseason. Finding a big will happen. You can sign guys to play center. You can draft guys in the 30s, in the 40s. I think they can turn into useful centers. Centers have never been more replaceable. I know the Grizzlies really struggled not having Steven Adams when he got hurt. He was unavailable for the Grizzlies the last year and a half. But I don't know if I believe necessarily in the Grizzlies trading up to get donovanclingan. Like, if donovanclingan were on the board for the Grizzlies, all right, I would be tempted just to do that because it does fit that need so much. It fills this giant hole you need. But I'm going to go ahead and assume donovanclingan is not available for the Grizzlies in this exercise. I'm also going to assume like Alex Sarr, not there. It looks like mock drafts have kind of consensus been like, listen, the top 4, Reese Shea is going real high. Alex Sarr's going real high. Klingan's going real high. Maybe like Reed Shepherd's going real high. I'm not certain I would take Reed Shepherd over Ron Holland just because I want the athletic wing. Give me an athletic wing. I love the idea of Gigi Jackson and Ron Holland. Again, we're building up wings on the team with size that fit around our core. The ceiling for those guys is so high. Ron Holland was the number 1 prospect coming into last season. For whatever reason, he slid down a lot of draft boards. Not the draft boards I care about, but a lot of the draft boards keep having Ron Holland available for the Grizzlies at 9. I cannot, frankly, see the Grizzlies passing up if Ron Holland's on the board when they pick at 9. I cannot see them taking Dalton Connect over him. Sorry, UT fans. I would love it if the Grizzlies took him. If you look at some of the mock drafts that have been out, the most up-to-date mock draft that I've seen, like ESPN, Jonathan Givony and Jeremy Woo did theirs, came out today. They have the Grizzlies taking Cody Williams. Okay, I see it. That's a wing. That works for me. But Bleacher Reports, they have Ron Holland going to the Grizzlies. SB Nations from last week, Ron Holland. Kevin O'Connor has the Grizzlies taking Ron Holland. I think Ron Holland is the type of player the Grizzlies still need, and you can never have too many of. I don't know if there's a roster building lesson from like the Celtics, because not everybody can get Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. Those guys both taken very, very high in the NBA draft. But to have just young, super young wings like Gigi Jackson and Ron Holland on the team that could one day be those interchangeable, switchable, huge wings, that is the prototype in my mind for the modern NBA. It also is the prototype for building around a team that's a little bit small with jamorant, with Desmond Bane, and also with a subpar rebounding Jaren Jackson Jr. Now, ideally, those big wings would shoot. But going back to the shooting thing, DeMichael Cole was talking about how, the Grizzlies have targeted shooting in the draft. It just hasn't worked out. It's why they chose to ride with Santi Aldama over like Kyle Anderson. I think it's useful to look at maybe past drafts and think about the players who were drafted specifically because they were good shooters. Okay? Look at last year's draft, 2023. The players that were taken because they could shoot. You had Jet Howard going to the Magic with the 11th pick. Jet Howard barely played last year. You look at Grady Dick going to the Raptors. You look at Jordan Hawkins, went 14th to the Pelicans. Jordan Hawkins showed he could score last year, had a pretty promising year. But when I think about the Grizzlies and their situation, which is I want to win in the next 2 seasons before Jaren Jackson Jr. hits free agency. When I look at the idea that, these young guys, almost all of them, probably going to be unable to help immediately. Maybe some guys like Clingan, that's immediate help. But you think about guys who get drafted who are a little bit older, they don't always immediately help. You had Brendan Pajimski last year. He was a rookie. He helped. But when I look at the shooters taken last season in the draft, Kobe Buffkin taken 15th for the Hawks. Didn't do much last year. Chris Murray went 23rd to the Trailblazers. Did Chris Murray have an impact on the NBA last season? No. He shot an okay percentage. You go down to Ben Shepherd for the Pacers. Ben Shepherd, he actually had some moments in the playoffs as injuries forced him into the rotation. But all this to say, you look at last year's draft, the guys drafted for shooting did not have that much of an immediate impact. Maybe they'll all develop to be great. You look a couple seasons ago, Jabari Smith was in the conversation for the top pick in the draft because of his dead-eye shooting. Reminder, Jabari Smith, his rookie year, shot 31% from 3. Last year, 36% from 3. Keegan Murray, all right, he was picked 4th 2 years ago. He did come right in and make an immediate impact with his three-point shooting. But Jabari Smith Jr. and Keegan Murray, those were the very top of the draft guys. You look at lower down in the draft 2 years ago. You had Johnny Davis taken 10th. That guy's unplayable. One of the worst picks in recent years. A.J. Griffin was one of the top shooting prospects in the draft 2 years ago. He was taken with the 16th pick. He's okay. He's also available. He's on the Hawks. Jake LaRavia, taken 19th. Patrick Baldwin was supposed to be an elite shooter. He was taken 28th in the 2022 draft. He stinks. So drafting guys for shooting, it doesn't necessarily work out. You think about the Grizzlies in the draft. Again, they took Santi Aldama. They took David Roddy. They took Jake LaRavia because they were shooters. Turns out they couldn't shoot. So in my mind, shooting is important, obviously. Maybe the most important thing in the NBA, but in the draft, right now, I'm more interested in getting an NBA level athlete who's a good player who maybe could become a good shooter. That is like the Herb Jones or Norm Powell years ago, Kawhi Leonard. These guys were athletes. They were players. And they developed the three-point shot. I don't know if Ron Holland will ever develop to be a good three-point shooter. His free throw shooting's fine. But I'd rather take a risk on an unbelievable athlete with a high-level motor who can defend, who can finish lobs, who can get up and down the court, and also has this high draft pedigree. I am all in on the Grizzlies drafting Ron Holland. Now, if they don't get Ron Holland, if Ron Holland's not available, here are the other guys. This is not maybe necessarily in an order, but these are the guys I'm most interested in. Modest Bazelis, Devin Carter, Khalil Ware, Stephen Castle, Cody Williams. I'm starting to kind of fall for Tyler Smith. He was a late addition. But for me right now, my number one target above all else is Ron Holland. So I'd be super excited if the Grizzlies end up with him. And again, I'm going to make a bold claim. If he's on the board, I'll be very surprised if the Grizzlies don't take him. But again, caveat, I have no idea what I'm talking about. Anyways, let's wrap up with a couple of news items. One, Brandon Clarke is not playing on the Canadian national team for the Paris Olympics. The Canadian national team is very, very deep with NBA talent. It seems like Brandon Clarke would be a great addition to this team because they're a little light in the front court. Although maybe Zach Edey's going to make the national squad. But for whatever reason, and I honestly would be extremely interested to find out the reasons that Brandon Clark is not going to play on Team Canada. If it's injury concerns, if the Grizzlies suggest that he not play as he prepares for the upcoming season, I don't know. Santi Aldama, however, is playing for the Spanish national team, which has Olympic qualifiers coming up at the start of July. So maybe we'll get to see some summer Santi playing international basketball. Oh, and by the way, Jamorant at his basketball camp in Memphis, he said he's 2 weeks away from being cleared for basketball activities. That, of course, is good news as Jamorant comes back from his shoulder issue. Anyways, the draft, of course, Wednesday night. I'm not doing anything as far as you consumer for the draft on Wednesday. There's not going to be an official watch party in Nashville. I'm not doing anything online. Apologies, but I had some conflicts, and I'm going to enjoy it offline. It's going to be a tremendous treat. But, of course, there'll be lots of content on the podcast feed and over on YouTube for all you Grizzlies fans. So make sure you check all of that out. Anyways, happy draft week. Thanks, you guys, for listening. I'll talk to you soon. Go Grizz.